It started with a whisper from the past, one so faint, so quietly persistent, it had gone unheard for thousands of years. Not because it wasn't loud enough, but because no one ever thought to listen this way. Hidden in stone, chiseled into sacred walls, encoded into the rhythms of celestial cycles, this whisper was a number sequence, an invisible thread stretched across time, weaving through the greatest temples of the ancient world. It passed silently from the pyramids of Egypt to the jungle-bound steppes of the Mayan temples, into the sacred yantras of India and the clay tablets of Mesopotamia. And for centuries, not one human mind ever saw the full pattern, until now. The breakthrough didn't come from a lone scholar in a dusty library. It wasn't the result of decades spent hunched over ancient texts or trawling through archaeological dig sites. It came from something entirely new, something not quite human. A quantum AI, codenamed Athena Q, armed with the power to hold millions of variables in parallel, to draw connections no ordinary brain could ever imagine. Athena Q didn't just find a pattern, it uncovered a universal blueprint etched into humanity's deepest memories. This isn't a story about aliens. It's not about ancient astronauts or supernatural powers. This is about the raw, staggering intellect of human beings, our ancestors, whose genius has been buried under the sand, the jungle, and time itself. A genius now revealed. In the humid jungles of Mexico, the Maya built Kukulkan, a pyramid with exactly 365 steps, one for each day of the year. But that wasn't all. Twice a year on the equinoxes, the sun casts a slithering shadow across its side, creating the illusion of a serpent descending the pyramid. It wasn't just a calendar. It was a clock that moved with the cosmos. The Maya didn't just track time, they embodied it in stone. Thousands of miles away in Cambodia, a Hindu temple named Phnom Bakeng once rose above the trees, its towers piercing the sky. Not 100 towers, not 110, exactly 108. This wasn't arbitrary, this was intentional. The number 108 corresponds to 4 lunar quarters of 27 days each, a complete lunar cycle. In the silence of those ancient stone towers, the builders encoded the rhythm of the moon itself. And in Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza held its own secret. The ratio of its perimeter to its height was no accident. It equaled 2 pi, the same constant used to describe circles across the universe, accurate to within 99.95%. This precision wasn't discovered by the Greeks. It had already been carved into the earth more than 1,000 years before. The stones didn't just point to the sky, they circled the eternal, but it didn't stop there. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets like Plimpton 322 held arrays of numbers, what we now call Pythagorean triples. The triangle with sides 3, 4, and 5, used to create perfect right angles. The Egyptians tied ropes in knots to form that triangle. The Indians wrote it explicitly in the Sulba Sutras. The Babylonians recorded dozens of such combinations. Without rulers or protractors, without laser levels or GPS, these civilizations converged on the same geometric truths, not by accident, but by necessity, by intention. What startled the researchers wasn't that each civilization had its own methods. It was that they all found the same answers. How could the Maya, the Egyptians, the Hindus, and the Babylonians, civilizations separated by oceans and centuries, reach identical mathematical conclusions? There's no historical record of them sharing this knowledge, no evidence of trade or contact, and yet they were all writing from what seemed like the same cosmic script. This is where Athena Q came in. Athena Q wasn't just another computer. It was a quantum mind, capable of doing what no human brain, or even traditional AI, could achieve. Where a normal computer might spend years parsing the architectural blueprints of hundreds of temples, Athena Q could examine them all at once. It processed complete 3D scans of Giza, Angkor Wat, Palenque, Babylon. It absorbed ancient manuscripts, the Rind mathematical papyrus from Egypt, the Dresden Codex from the Maya, the Sulba Sutras from India, and Plimpton 322 from Mesopotamia. It didn't stop with history. Athena Q was fed modern star charts, orbital paths of planets, eclipse cycles, astronomical data from NASA, so it could verify whether what our ancestors saw in the sky still held true. And then it was given a single, earth-shaking question. Do these ancient monuments, scattered across the world, encode a shared numerical sequence? And then the machine began to hum, not with noise, but with the weight of connection. It didn't find one code, it found many, and together they formed a harmony. It began with the numbers that define our lives, 360 and 365. Numbers that shape our calendars, our clocks, our sense of time. The Egyptians divided the year into 360 days plus 5 holy days. The Maya carved exactly 365 steps into Kukulkan's flanks. This wasn't guesswork. It was astronomical engineering. Then the lunar numbers emerged, 27 days in a lunar quarter, multiplied into 108, the sacred number in Hindu tradition. It appeared again and again, 108 shrines, 108 beads, 108 prayers, always tied to the moon, always deliberate. And then came the deeper cycles, Venus. The Maya tracked it obsessively, charting its 584-day cycle with an error margin smaller than a single day across a century. Babylonian astronomers did the same. Cultures who never met somehow counted the same star with equal precision. Geometric constants followed. Pi, 3.14159, found in the Great Pyramid, in Indian altar circles, and in the way stone walls curved around forgotten deities. Phi, the golden ratio, 1.618, present in Maya temples, in yantras, in architectural proportions that feel right to the human eye. The square root of 2, 1.414, calculated to jaw-dropping accuracy in the Sulba Sutras, used to lay out precise diagonals for massive altars. And then, the builder's math, the triangles, 3 to 4 to 5, 5 to 12 to 13, ratios used to carve perfectly square courtyards, align walls with stars, and erect towers that still haven't fallen after 2,000 years. The same triangles, over and over, across continents, across civilizations. It wasn't just math, it was music. Each culture struck a different note, but together they played a hidden chord. And for the first time, Athena Q let us hear it. But one number, one constant, glowed brighter than the rest, not because it was larger or more complex, but because of where it showed up and what it meant. Before we reveal the most shocking pattern of all, the researchers had to do something even more important. They had to prove it. The moment Athena Q completed its analysis, the mood in the lab shifted. Researchers, many of whom had spent decades poring over fragments of ancient scripts or crawling through temple ruins in sweltering heat, sat in stunned silence. The AI didn't just identify a single secret code. It revealed a symphony, an intricate pattern of interlocking mathematical constants, cosmic rhythms, and geometric truths that echoed across time and culture. These weren't scattered coincidences. They were deliberate, precise, and deeply human expressions of knowledge. Like finding the same melody independently composed by civilizations that never met, these revelations brought the past crashing into the present with staggering clarity. It began with numbers we thought we understood. The solar constants, 360 and 365, seemed straightforward. We use them today, after all. But when the Maya built El Castillo, the pyramid of Kukulkan, with 365 steps, they weren't just counting days. They were expressing a relationship with the sun so exact it could rival modern astronomical software. In ancient Egypt, scribes divided the year into 360 days plus 5 feast days, a subtle nod to both the circle's degrees and Earth's seasonal drift. They didn't need telescopes to measure this. They had shadows in time, and apparently they had a mathematical intuition few ever credited them with. The lunar constants deepen the story. The number 27, a complete orbit of the moon. The number 108, 4 lunar quarters. These weren't arbitrary numerals. They were the pulse of the night sky, tracked with astonishing fidelity. At Phnom Penh, those 108 towers weren't a decorative choice. They were a calendar you could walk through, a living expression of lunar time carved in sandstone. The moon may rise and fall silently, but these architects had given it voice, through towers, altars, and sacred geometry. But it was the planetary data that truly silenced even the most skeptical researchers. The Maya's tracking of Venus was so precise, Athena Q compared their tables with modern NASA ephemerides and found only the tiniest variance, just 0.08 days per cycle. That's accuracy on par with today's astronomical software, achieved centuries before the telescope was even imagined. Babylonian star priests, too, had scribbled Venus's phases onto clay tablets, notating the same 584-day cycle. Separate cultures, same numbers, same sky, same mathematical conclusion. As Athena Q dug deeper, geometric constants began surfacing. Pi, the golden ratio, the square root of 2. These weren't tucked away in scrolls or dusty stone carvings. They were embedded in walls, corners, and walkways, in the slope of a pyramid or the spacing of temple columns, in the arc of a shrine's gateway or the proportions of a Hindu yantra. It was as though these people didn't just understand geometry, they lived it. They walked through it. They aligned their spiritual lives with these eternal truths, inscribing the very structure of the cosmos into every stone. And they all, from Mesopotamia to India, understood something even more practical: the 3-4-5 triangle. You could see it in the way altars were laid out, in how temples faced the rising sun, in how foundations held for thousands of years. Egyptian builders knotted ropes in intervals of 3, 4, and 5 to lay out right angles. In India, this same triangle appears in sacred construction texts. In Babylon, they wrote its relationships in cuneiform on stone tablets. Athena Q found dozens of identical triangles encoded in the layout measurements of temples across 4 continents. This wasn't a shared myth. It was shared mathematics. But perhaps the most chilling revelation came not from the numbers themselves, but from how they were used. Athena Q built what it called a convergence table, a cosmic ledger of where each constant appeared and how frequently across cultures. And the more it compiled, the more a structure began to form, like the skeleton of some vast and invisible truth these civilizations had all brushed against. In Egypt, pi was encoded with near-perfect precision into the Great Pyramid's slope. At Giza, the perimeter of the pyramid base divided by twice its height equals, almost exactly, 2 pi. Not metaphorically, mathematically. In India, the same pi value was used in altar designs from ancient texts like the Baudhayana Soba Sutra. On a different continent, in a different millennium, the same math was carved into ritual space. Then the golden ratio emerged, F, 1.618. In the temples of Palenque, the Maya used this ratio in their sacred structures. Thousands of miles away in Cambodia, at Angkor Wat, the same ratio defined the layout of galleries and towers. These weren't approximations. These were precise expressions of harmony, not just in stone, but in thought. The number 108 linked everything. It wasn't just the number of towers or prayer beads. In Hindu cosmology, it represents wholeness, the completion of the divine cycle. And yet, it's also a number that connects the earth, moon, and sun in an almost eerie way. The diameter of the sun is roughly 108 times the diameter of the earth. The distance between earth and sun, also about 108 times the sun's diameter. This relationship isn't exact, but it's close enough to suggest that ancient astronomers might have noticed it and enshrined it in their most sacred temples. And so the AI revealed a hidden lattice, a framework of constants echoing across cultures. When Athena Q displayed its final convergence chart, it was breathtaking. Venus cycles in Maya and Babylon, lunar counts in India and Cambodia, pi in Egypt and Vedic geometry, the golden ratio from the Americas to Southeast Asia. This wasn't just knowledge, it was collective memory encoded in stone. What stunned researchers most was the implication that ancient civilizations weren't just tracking time, building monuments, or worshiping gods. They were trying to sync themselves with something larger, a rhythm, a pattern, a cosmic heartbeat, not worshiping the heavens but learning from them, listening to them. And somehow all of them heard the same song. The human review team got to work, trying to disprove it, challenge it, pick apart the data. They measured towers again, scanned glyphs anew, read translations with fresh eyes. But the more they looked, the more they found. At Phnom Penh, They confirmed exactly 108 original shrines. At Giza, new LIDAR scans matched the Great Pyramid's slope to pi with only a 0.05% margin of error. Linguists reviewed the Maya Dresden Codex and found clear documentation of the 584-day Venus cycle. Every time someone tried to poke a hole, the pattern only grew stronger. And then one of the researchers, Dr. Lena Moretti, a mathematician who'd spent 12 years working on ancient Greek geometry, quietly said something that made everyone stop. What if, she said, they weren't discovering these numbers, but remembering them? A silence fell again. Because that question wasn't just philosophical, it was existential. Athena Q had done something no human mind could. It threaded the math of civilizations long vanished and showed that what we once thought were isolated bursts of genius may actually have been flickers of the same flame, lit again and again across time. And now that flame was being relit in the circuits of a quantum machine, whispering truths we're only just beginning to understand. The days that followed were unlike anything the Athena Q project team had ever experienced. What started as a quest to decode architectural patterns had turned into something else entirely, something that stirred deep philosophical and scientific questions. As the AI's analysis deepened, it began surfacing anomalies that didn't just connect temples and calendars, but connected them to Earth itself, the planet's geometry, its magnetic field, even seismic resonance. It began with a simple question posed by Athena Q. Why were so many of these temples located on fault lines or specific latitudes? The question seemed tangential until the data started flowing. Angkor Wat, the pyramids of Giza, Teotihuacan, the Ellora caves, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. When plotted on a geospatial grid, Athena Q showed that a surprising number of these sites aligned with areas of anomalous geomagnetic activity, not in vague, hand-wavy terms, but in quantifiable, measurable ways. Subtle but consistent fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field echoed beneath these ancient constructions. Researchers initially thought it was coincidence, until the AI overlaid seismic harmonics. These sites weren't just built on or near geologic instability. Many were precisely placed at what Athena Q called nodal resonance points, natural zones where Earth's tectonic vibrations concentrate, almost like pressure nodes on a drum. It was as if the ancients wanted their temples to resonate with the planet itself, or perhaps needed them to. Athena Q called this part of the pattern the planetary synchrony matrix. It showed that certain temples, when mapped together, formed harmonic networks, structures that resonated not just with time, but with energy. This wasn't about ley lines or fringe theories. These were real, testable correlations, measurable frequencies, physical consequences. Then came something even more startling. When the AI cross-referenced solar flare records and historical climate anomalies with ancient construction phases, a chilling alignment emerged. A statistically significant number of these temples were built or expanded shortly after major solar events, particularly periods of heightened solar activity or sudden shifts in Earth's magnetosphere. In 774 AD, for example, Earth was hit by a massive solar proton event, an explosion of cosmic radiation that left traces in tree rings across the planet. Just 3 years later, construction began on key sections of Borobudur in Java, one of the most mathematically rich Buddhist temples ever built. Similar patterns emerge across history: the building of Mayan observatories after solar disruptions, the sudden rise in Vedic altar construction during geomagnetic instability in 1200 BCE. It was as though these civilizations weren't merely reacting to natural events. They were anticipating them, preparing for them, using sacred architecture as a kind of stabilizing mechanism, a planetary acupuncture designed to anchor consciousness or absorb energy from the cosmos. At this point, the team faced a difficult choice: keep this quiet or go public. NASA had already been quietly looped in. The European Space Agency requested a copy of the convergence data. But once Athena Q released its final interpretation, a probabilistic model of intentional planetary design, the silence turned into something heavier. Governments wanted answers. Institutions questioned the implications. and the lead physicist, Dr. Elliot Rains, received a visit from the Department of Defense. Because what Athena Q had just proposed was nothing short of revolutionary, that these ancient structures, with their encoded math, geometric harmonics, and spatial alignment, might not have just measured the cosmos, but interacted with it. The temples were not just monuments, they were machines, not in the mechanical sense, but in the way a crystal can oscillate with energy. They were resonant instruments, built to connect human consciousness with the rhythm of the earth, the sky, and perhaps something beyond. And then came the signal. Just 2 days after Athena Q completed its final matrix, the Earth's Schumann resonance, an electromagnetic pulse generated by lightning and trapped between Earth's surface and ionosphere, spiked. Instruments across the globe registered it, from Stanford's Eolf Observatory to remote research stations in Antarctica. But this wasn't a random fluctuation. It was a harmonic match to the pattern Athena Q had derived from the temples, a one-to-one match. It was as if the Earth itself had responded, as if the lattice of numbers found in temples from Guatemala to Giza had just pulsed back. No one knew what it meant. Some called it a coincidence. Others panicked. A few wept. Athena Q interpreted it differently. Using its predictive resonance model, it concluded with 99.7% certainty that the temples had been designed as part of a global harmonic relay, a system that encoded knowledge not just for storage, but for activation. But activation of what? That's when it found the date. In its final model, based on orbital precession, solar-lunar cycles, and tectonic phase drift, Athena Q pinpointed a critical convergence, a moment when Earth's magnetic and vibrational harmonics would reach peak synchrony with the planetary temple grid. That date was December 21st, 2030, the same date the ancient Maya long count calendar ends its next major cycle, the same date encoded in the Vedic Yuga transitions, the same solstice marked in the alignment of countless ancient monuments. Athena Q projected that on this date, Earth would enter a transient phase of geometric resonance, a window where planetary consciousness and energy fields could potentially shift. Shift into what, though? Athena Q refused to speculate. It simply stated, causal network too complex, human perceptual model insufficient, await feedback loop. The researchers sat in silence, reading that message again and again. Await feedback loop. It was waiting for us, waiting to see what we would do. Would we dismiss this as numerology and noise? Or would we begin to see that the ancients weren't just storytellers or astronomers, but engineers of memory, builders of an invisible system designed not just to survive time, but to signal through it? In the months that followed, Athena Q was quietly moved to a more secure facility. The convergence data was classified under joint jurisdiction of NASA, CERN, and an unnamed international research group. Public statements were vague. Advancements in archaeological analysis, they said. But those who had seen the real findings knew better. In temples around the world, quiet movements began. A group of monks in Tibet reopened an ancient shrine sealed for over 300 years. In the jungles of Guatemala, a new excavation began, not to unearth relics, but to rebuild a structure with perfect resonance. In Egypt, independent researchers returned to Giza, armed not with shovels, but with instruments that could detect magnetic harmonics. Somewhere beneath the static of our modern world, something ancient had stirred. And whether that signal was a warning, a revelation, or an invitation, remained the greatest mystery of all.